If you've been shopping around for aftermarket cams, you may have wondered, should I change my cam plate out when I do a set of performance cams? Well, the stock cam plate for most people in most situations is pretty good. But when you start adding performance cams and really kind of starting to take your bike to the next level, it's definitely something you might want to consider upgrading when you do a set of cams, because the cam plate does quite a bit more than just support the cams. So for today, we're going to take a look at the stock cam plate and kind of see some of the inherent flaws that it has, and then we're going to take a look at aftermarket cam plates and what improvements are actually made to those to actually help your motorcycle perform better. Now, before we get into all that, we need to take a look and understand exactly what the cam plate in your motorcycle does, because as I've mentioned, it does a lot more than just support the cams. It actually serves some very important functions within your engine. But before we get into all that today, please be sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So now, the cam plate not only supports your cams, but it circulates oil to all the critical parts of your engine. And not only that, your cam plate has a bypass valve in it. And this bypass valve's job is to relieve excess oil pressure and allow oil to return back to the bike's oil pump. Now, when that excess pressure is relieved, that bypass valve is supposed to close and allow all the oil to start circulating back through the cam plate. But that doesn't always happen 100% of the time with the stock cam plate. Part of the issue with the factory cam plate is that it's a cast unit. And some of the internal parts that they use for the bypass valve on the stock cam plate, they don't always seal 100% of the time. And also with it being that cast unit, that doesn't really help matters either. Now, this can really be a problem at low RPMs and idle. What happens is you start to lose oil pressure at low RPMs and idle from this bypass valve hanging open a little bit. And when you're losing oil pressure at idle like that, that really starves some of your critical engine components of that much needed lubrication. Now, the bypass valve not seating fully is very common at low RPMs and idle. And what happens is that reduces your oil pressure, and not only your oil pressure, but your oil volume. And with both of those being reduced, that really starts to starve some of your critical components of the oil that they really need to stay lubricated properly. So the factory cam plates are actually die-cast units, as where the aftermarket units are made of a chunk of CNC'd aluminum. Now, with the die casting process, there is an inherent problem with die casting, and that is porosity. When these units are poured into a cast mold, they still have tiny little air bubbles in them in some cases. Most foundries, they try to keep this down to a minimum, but it still happens. And one inherent problem that happens with this porosity with the stock cam plate is that unfortunately, some of these air pockets, and this is very common around the seal for the bypass valve. And unfortunately, with the porosity and the issues with these castings, this tends to happen quite often around the seat for the bypass valve, which is part of the reason what causes it to leak by. So when you combine the voids in the die cast process along with the irregular tip of the factory bypass valve, you're never going to get a good seal. It's never going to fully seal with that factory cam plate when that bypass valve closes, which again is going to lead to it leaking by at low RPMs and idle, and it's going to be basically starving your engine of oil, low oil pressure and low oil volume to your engine's critical components. With a bypass valve leaking by, you start to have problems with all your hydraulic components, your lifters, your cam chain tensioners, your valves, anything that's run by hydraulics in that engine. And this is where you start to get accelerated engine wear, and then you really start to hear a lot of noise coming from the engine. So if you guys have a lot of strange noises coming from your engine and you can't really narrow it down, be sure to check out that bypass valve on your cam plate. Unfortunately, when we really start modifying the motorcycle, that's when these issues really start to become noticeable. That's when you start adding the performance heads, the performance cams, increasing compression. So you're kind of starting to get the picture now why you probably would want to change out that cam plate. Now, with just a set of cams, you might be able to get by just fine with the stock cam plate. But I would still highly recommend changing to an aftermarket unit with a set of cams, especially if you're going any further with the bike with big bore kits, higher compression, because you don't want to put all that money into it and then have it suffer from accelerated wear and premature failure just because of a leaking bypass valve with your stock cam plate. But don't worry, there are plenty of aftermarket options out there that can solve this problem. Now, I've got some on here that are pretty inexpensive, but either way, they're a heck of a lot better than the factory cam plate. Now, a lot of aftermarket companies out there are making cam plates these days. I picked some of the top ones I thought were right on the price and would pretty much serve everybody out there that's doing some mild upgrades to their bike or even some extreme upgrades in some cases. So for the first cam plate on my list today, this is a great cam plate to buy if you're just doing a cam upgrade and while you're in there you want to go ahead and swap this out. This is the Fueling OE cam plate. The Fueling OE cam plate is going to run you $259.95. It's made of CNC aluminum. It is a direct bolt-in unit. It also accepts your factory oil pump, and it's available with either chain or gear-driven cams, and they've added a cam journal groove for increased lubrication on cold startup, and an additional oil pressure feed holes front and back of the cam journals to prevent cam thrusting. Now I'd say the Fueling OE cam at $259.95, that is a great addition to your new cam sets. So even if you're going to run the stock oil pump, it'll still use that, but at the same time, if you're in there, I would definitely recommend upgrading the oil pump as well. So the Fueling is great for just a cam swap. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more out of a cam plate than that one, S&S has got you covered. This one's got a little bit more features on it, plus you can also adjust your oil pressure with this cam plate. So let's go check out this S&S. This is the S&S TC3. This cam plate's going to run you $375.95. Once again, it's made of CNC aluminum, and what I love about this one is it has an adjustable oil pressure regulator that you do not have to remove the plate for. You could do all this with just the cam cover off. It has removable passage plugs for service and rebuildable bronze pinion shafts within the cam plate. Now at $375.95, that's quite a bit more expensive than our Fueling cam plate, but you do have a little bit more adjustability. It's rebuildable. It's a really nice cam plate, and it's from S&S, so you know it's going to be of the highest quality. And also, if you wanted to, you could pair this with one of S&S's high-quality, high-volume oil pumps, which, once again, I would highly recommend doing. Now, as you're going to notice with all of these aftermarket cam plates, they're all made out of the CNC aluminum, and there's a reason for that. With the CNC aluminum, they have much better control over the machining that goes into them, and they don't have those little pits inside of them and those little air pockets that develop with the cast cam plates that come from the factory. So the next cam plate on my list is from Screamin Eagle. This is the Screamin Eagle High Performance CNC Billet Aluminum cam plate. Now this cam plate's going to run you $439.95, but at $439.95, it is once again CNC aluminum, and it comes with a high volume oil pump, which is going to increase your oil supply pressure by 16% and scavenging by 29%. And as I mentioned, with it being CNC aluminum, this ensures precise dimensions for strength, rigidity, and durability. And with that being said, that provides higher oil pressure with hot oil to reduce pressure drop. Now the Screamin Eagle cam plate at $439 that includes the high volume oil pump, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, that's not a bad price at all for a high performance cam plate and a good high volume oil pump. And also I know a lot of guys out there really like to stick with the Harley-Davidson parts. And there's nothing wrong with that. The Screamin Eagle cam plate is a really good cam plate. I mean, I would say it's comparable to the S&S and the Fueling, but I still would think the Fueling is probably just a little more high quality as well as the S&S. But anyhow, let's move on to the Zippers cam plate. A lot of guys out there, anytime I've done a video, they've always mentioned Zippers, so I wanted to throw something from Zippers in here today. So let's go check out that Zippers cam plate. This is Zippers blueprinted CNC aluminum cam plate. This is going to run you $447.95. Now Zippers puts a lot of work into their cam plates. On their cam plates, the bypass valve seat is hand sealed, hand lapped, and it's oil pressure tested before it ever goes out. And these also offer 50% greater oil pressure at idle. Stable oil pressure at high RPMs and high temperatures as well. That Zippers cam plate's a really nice piece. I know it's a little bit more expensive, but with zippers taking the time to actually hand lap the valve seat, and plus they use their own valve design in that, that's why you're getting that 50% greater oil pressure just by making sure that valve is 100% sealed. Now, even with that said, I would still go with the high volume oil pump of your choice. You can use just about any high volume oil pump you'd like. And zippers is definitely worth a look, even at $447.95. So guys, as you can see, the cam plate does a lot more than just support the cams. And by going with a CNC aluminum unit, you're going to ensure that bypass valve is sealing, you're going to have higher oil pressure, you're going to have less oil pressure drop when your engine is freaking hot during the summer and your oil is at like 230 degrees. So if you're going to take the time to bolt in a set of cams, getting an aftermarket cam plate is definitely worth a look, especially with some of the issues that we talked about that can arise with having the factory cam plate and with that thing being cast. So guys, I hope this answered your questions on, do I need a cam plate when I'm going to put in new cams? The answer is, well, not really. You don't totally need one, but it sure is a good idea if you can swing that extra cost. And I would highly recommend it while you're in there, along with a high volume oil pump. So guys, let me know in the comments which cam plate setup you like the best. Did you like the fueling? Did you like the S&S, the zippers, or the Screamin' Eagle? Which one would you go with? Or if you know of one that I didn't mention it in the comments. We'll talk about it. So guys, that's all I've got for you this week. Be sure to give that video a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe. So until next week, guys, y'all stay safe on the streets, ride smart, dodge those cars, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.